Hey there, everybody. Welcome to the Sports on the Positive Tip podcast. And this is pretty cool because we are actually in the same room together.
Yeah.
Yeah, in the same space, which is unbelievable. So this is Kenny and
Kenny Squared.
with the Sports on the Positive Tip podcast. And so, Kenny, I hope everybody had a great Christmas. We had a great Christmas here. So great to have you in person. And we can talk about a few things. We're going to hit on what was your favorite failure? I know that sounds kind of weird, but we're going to talk about that, right? And then we want to talk about, as this will be our last podcast for 2020, so we want to talk about,
we made it.
So we want to talk about what were the top moments, your top sports moments in 2020. And I know you guys will have some interesting ones. I think Kenny and I have a couple of interesting ones that we'll talk about as well. But first, why don't we talk a little bit about some current events going on? NBA season started this week. What are some of your initial thoughts?
I think probably one of the bigger things that I really took away from is the Nets are really good.
They sure are, huh?
It's kind of scary. I had said this earlier, and I know it's only 2 games, so it might be a little bit of an overreaction, but I think the Nets are the team to beat in the East. The only team that could beat them is themselves. I'm a little still worried about the chemistry. Durant and Kyrie Irving are a little bit sometimes aloof, but we'll see. They looked really good, dominating both 2 really good teams. So I would say that's probably one of my biggest takeaways from the NBA season.
Yeah, I would agree. The Nets really came out on fire. I was surprised how good the Lakers looked. That was my big takeaway. I didn't really see any of the Lakers-Clippers. The opening night game was just on too late. But we did get to watch a good chunk of the game yesterday after dinner. We popped it on, and, man, they look like they're in midseason form. I was surprised LeBron James, just an unbelievable athlete that he is. I was really surprised how well and how fit and how he had legs. I know he didn't play a ton of minutes against the Clippers, but boy, they ran away from Dallas, who seems to be crowned the next big thing, right? Luka, and they're a good team, but they can't stay with the Lakers. My goodness.
No, and it's interesting too because you look at guys like Michael Jordan and some of the other great players. At this point in their career, they were either done or clearly over the hill. Yeah. It seems like LeBron is still very much in his prime. He could still be he could win another title this year and be the best player on his team.
He's unbelievable. I don't know what he does to stay in shape, whatever it is. They need to bottle it because he's, 37, right? And he looks like he's 21. The way he's playing, it's unbelievable. And the Lakers, the way they retooled and got, they're so deep. They played probably 12 players yesterday. I was telling Nick, who was here, that it's going to be tough to find minutes for everybody.
Yeah.
But, and it seems like LeBron and Anthony Davis have a better chemistry than they even did last year through these first couple of games. At least they did yesterday. So similar to, Kevin Durant and Kyrie having chemistry almost right away, which typically you don't see that at least till mid-season or something, right?
Yeah, especially I know it's not no training camp, but very limited training camp.
Yeah.
Only a couple preseason games. They look like they work really well.
Yeah.
Which will definitely help them because I feel sometimes you get guys that come together. I think of Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons. Sometimes it doesn't work, but it seems like it's working for them.
Yeah.
And if Kevin Durant is at all the player he was 2 years ago before the injury, everyone's got to watch out for those guys.
I can't agree more. Any surprise on the other end? Are you surprised that the Celtics have started 0-2?
A little bit. The Celtics kind of ran into some crazy luck with the Bucks. Well, actually, they ended up winning that game, but the Warriors too. I think to me they're the most surprising. They were only the 4th team I believe that got blown out twice in their first 2 games. And they also had the worst loss on Christmas Day in 50 years or something like that.
So you're more surprised by the Warriors than you are by the Celtics?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think the Celtics will be fine. I think they'll be there. It's tough in the NBA, though. If you're 5, 6, 7 games under 500, that's tough to make up. We've said that a long time with our Knicks.
Yeah.
Well, and let's talk about them for a quick second. I thought both of us watched that game, or most of it, right? Yeah, I think we saw almost the whole thing.
Yeah.
And Indiana, very good team, and they played well. But I mean, that was their first half was some of the best Knick basketball that I know I've seen in at least 3-4 years.
Yeah, I would probably even go as far as to say like 6 or 7 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. They really look good. RJ Barrett looks like he may be taking that next step.
Yep.
Which would be really huge. I think the biggest thing is they really lost the defensive intensity in the second half. But once again, it's game one. This is a new coach, a few new pieces in there. So I think if we take that time, I think the Knicks could actually – I don't think the Knicks will be a great team this year, but they at least I think have a shot of being like in the playoff picture, even if it's like as like a 9 or 10 seed trying to fight their way into the playoffs.
Yeah. And I think Knicks fans will be patient.
Yeah.
Especially if they see the progress. There was clear progress. Even though they lost, there was clear progress in the way they played defensively. I mean, but they have to keep up that defensive intensity, but I think their coach won't let them let up on defense.
Yeah.
It's really nice to see Mike Woodson back, too.
Yeah.
Because he's, since Jeff Van Gundy left, he's been by far their best coach. I shouldn't say by far. D'Antoni, I think, did a decent job, but Woodson did an excellent job, I thought. I thought he got a bad deal when they brought Phil Jackson in. If they kept him, I mean, and no offense to Jeff Hornacek or Derek Fisher.
The other list of guys.
Yeah. Kurt Rambis. That didn't work out. David Fizdale. So, I'm excited. I think it's good to have the NBA back. Anything stand out from football in last Sunday? Or I know there was one game yesterday. The Saints really, really look good, huh?
Yeah, that Saints offense could be scary.
Yeah.
And then also, I mean, the Browns, once again, I don't think we got that in last week, but the Browns played really well.
Sunday night, sure. Yeah.
Right now, and the Browns game might be in flux because they had a positive COVID test. They're supposed to play Jets tomorrow. But Browns fans are still getting excited. And I had read that Baker Mayfield, since Odell got hurt, is ranked a top 5 quarterback in the league, which to me kind of says like, it's interesting how sometimes we just talked about fits. Sometimes like the talent could be there, but sometimes it's just not a good fit.
Yeah.
Like think about sometimes like people in churches, like they can love God, but it may not be the best church for them because of like they don't have the right people around them or they don't get along as well with the pastor. Just because it's not a good fit doesn't mean you throw the whole thing out.
Right. Yeah, that's an interesting thought. It'll be interesting to see what they do with Odell. When he's healthy next year. Listen, part of me is now rooting for the Browns because they're kind of a little bit of an underdog here. It's been so long. I like when these teams rise up that's been down for so long, and I hate to see like Detroit and Jacksonville be down so bad, and of course my Jets be down so bad this year because I'd like to see some of these teams get a shot. The excitement in the cities. And I have a couple of friends that are Detroit Lion fans that are just suffering. I know nobody is a Jacksonville Jaguar fan, but I'm sure they are. They've got a good fan base. But, all right, so football, we're headed into the home stretch. It should be a lot of fun the rest of this weekend as well as next weekend, as the playoff picture comes into play. All right, so what's your favorite failure? That's not original from you and I. You sent me an article, and I didn't realize that this gentleman has a podcast series, and I've seen him on ESPN. I really didn't know him as a player. So why don't you talk about Emmanuel, and I'm forgetting his last name, but you know it. And this is thought-provoking because when you start to think about what's your favorite failure, those two words don't seem to go well together. But go ahead.
Yeah. So Emmanuel Acho was
Emmanuel Acho. Okay.
He was originally drafted by the Cleveland Browns. Played a couple of years with the Browns, the Eagles, kind of bounced around. He had eventually he got injured pretty much every single year, and all the injuries were really rough on his body. So he had to retire at a fairly early age. Still a young guy. He went straight into broadcasting, ESPN for a little bit. Right now he's on Fox Sports 1 with the show Speak for Yourself, which I watched a little bit of. there's some times where I feel like they kind of are just taking takes to like stir the pot, so to speak. But I think they do have some good stuff there. But one of his main focuses is he has a YouTube series called Uncomfortable Conversations with the Black Man. And through it, he has different people, whether it's he's had biracial couples on there, he's had conversations with police officers. He had Carl Lentz, who's the former pastor of Hillsong Church. A lot of different like prominent figures in sports just to have conversations about really tough issues. Kind of birthed a little bit out of the riots and the racial issues earlier this year. So he had a video that launched a couple weeks ago where he responded to a comment where they said like, you were such a failure in the NFL. And so he kind of went through like, as a high school player, he was top guy, ready to do really well, went to a premier college. I don't remember which college right now. And then got drafted in the first round. And in his first season, tore his MCL, which like for most people, like that's a devastating injury. Was devastated that he couldn't finish out his first year. And then worked his way back. And then I believe it was that he tore his groin. And then he ended up getting traded to the Eagles. And while he was rehabbing, he got traded to the Giants. And then go back to the Eagles and then kept getting released and cut, ended up on a practice squad for a little bit, and then just decided to turn it in. And he said as a result of that, yes, it was really frustrating because as he was coming up, he thought that he was going to be a Hall of Fame player. He thought he was going to be one of those upper echelon guys. And it just never happened for him. But he said that it was his favorite failure because through his platform of the NFL, he's able to do what he's doing now, whether that's provoking those conversations with other people about some of the issues regarding race in our society right now, whether it's having fun talking about sports and talking about some of the NFL stuff. If you listen to him, I would encourage you to check out some of his stuff on football because he is really knowledgeable. He knows a lot of the ins and outs. He analyzes stats at a very different perspective because he's not just saying it as like a fan or someone that's never been there. Like he's actually been on an NFL team. So I always think that that's a very unique perspective too. So it really kind of got us thinking like, what exactly, like when we look at our world, when we look at God intervening in our lives, a lot of times those things that are failures can be our favorite failures because everything that God has for us in our lives end up working towards the good. I think of my own story of getting fired from Chase, where I was up for a promotion. I was ready to kind of take that next step. But then God was like, no, you're going in a whole different direction. But then that direction led me to being a college student again, and then working, going to North Point, and then interning in Cleveland, and then settling down in Cleveland, getting married and having a kid, and now doing what I love, working at a nonprofit, working as a pastor, as a missionary. So I think it is very interesting how sometimes like we look at a lot of like 2020 can be considered a failure for a lot of people for a myriad of reasons. But when we look at it, it could be one of our favorite failures because it can help us take that next step and go to that next level that God has for us.
Really, really powerful stuff you said there. And I always liked Emmanuel Acho from when I'd see him on Get Up and listen to him on ESPN. I didn't realize his story. And in that moment, I'm sure when he got hurt in that moment, he's devastated. And obviously he was a huge college player because he got drafted really high. But for him to take that and then use it for other things, it's amazing. And your story is just living proof because without you getting fired, which it was a little anticlimactic, for you because it was an investigation that went on and on seemingly forever. It seems like it took almost a month, I think. And it was tough every day. I remember we would see you going to work and coming home, no news yet, and auditors flying in to search for money that who knew how it disappeared. Obviously, they knew you didn't take it or anything like that. But you see where that led to. It led to you going back to school, which led to you interning, which led to you meeting your wife, which led to you getting married, having a son. But think about also the kids in whose lives you've impacted and in that neighborhood who you've impacted. And that might not have happened had you stayed at Chase. As you said, you were getting ready to move up. And I think you liked working in a bank. I never got the sense that you loved it, but I always thought that you liked it. And so favorite failure, I'm really gonna, we don't realize in that moment what God is doing. And, as part of a sermon that I'm doing tomorrow, that, we just don't understand in the moment God's eternal plans, for us. And Emmanuel talked about that, pretty clearly on his podcast. So I think my message through that for anybody that's listening is you really just don't know at that moment. You have to just take that step back and you have to pray, right? I think that's really important. And I'm sure you did that, but you have to really take that step back and, hey, God, what are you telling me here? What are you doing, right now? And it's amazing because, again, you have that failure, but is it really a failure? Can you look back now these years later and say, hey, me getting fired at the bank was a failure? It really wasn't. It was a blessing, right?
Yeah.
And he said the same thing. Those injuries, which I'm sure were brutally hard to deal with, but that's a blessing for him now. I mean, he's got this whole new career. He's still really young. I think he was 25 when he had to retire from the NFL.
Yeah.
And there's a lot. I also like that. This is the last thing I'll say. I also liked how he let go. Where a lot of people would still hang on because he felt like, because he was part of the taxi squad, which I had no idea what that was. I did have a friend, someone who I worked with, that sort of taxi squad for the Dolphins and for Tampa Bay. He loved it because he was around the players and everything like that. It's just on game day, he wasn't on the sidelines. They were, sitting in the stands and stuff like that. But he loved that. He was still kind of realizing his dream, even, if he never got to the regular team. Emmanuel didn't like it. He said, the taxi squad was like, okay, it was great. We're playing, but we're practicing. And he said, I couldn't be part of the game. And so that's where he kind of knew that, hey, it's time to step away.
Yeah. He is also a Christian too. I don't know if we directly said that.
Yeah.
I think just looking at like the idea of letting go, one of the things that he mentioned is like he's part of the Forbes like most successful people under 30.
Yeah.
And like a lot of that probably wouldn't have happened if he was just like, no, I'm gonna get back. Like sometimes like the plans that we have in our head aren't what God has. And if we just let them go, God will provide that bigger and better thing for us.
Yeah. And I think that knowing God, I'm glad you mentioned that he's a Christian. Knowing God, I think it definitely helps, right?
Yeah.
But you can discover God through a process like that, right? Yep. You can really, come to God and through a life-changing event like he went through. Okay, so sports in 2020. I can only, since we talked about it this morning, I'll say mine real quick because I know you probably have a few. I really only have, there were a lot of great moments, right? But I can't think about this year without thinking about, let me take that back. I have two quick moments. And one was Kobe Bryant, right? And I don't want to dwell on that because what a tragedy, what a terrible story it was. Again, we don't know what God's plan is there, right? But we know God has a plan. But for me, I'll tell it real quick. I'm at a work event up in Connecticut. We had a great couple of days, and this is in the middle of March. And we're starting to, hear about COVID. And I remember even when I left my peers, we didn't even shake hands, because by the time we were hearing things and we were getting all these alerts, we kind of just clunked fists or we clunked elbows on our way out. Whereas that Monday when we met, we're like hugging each other and everything like that. We went to dinner. We worked really hard for those couple of days. I'll never forget, I caught an early ferry home. So I got home maybe about 5:30, 6 o'clock. The Knicks were on, I'm watching them. And then the bulletin comes across that the NBA season is stopping. that there was a positive test in Utah, that the game was canceled at that moment. And I switched right over to, I think it was a Wednesday night, so I'm pretty sure ESPN was covering the game. And so, and the Portland Denver game, I think it was them, was still going to play that night. But whatever game they were getting ready to cover was canceled. And then it was like breaking news, and it was all over. And that made me realize right away that this COVID thing was real. Yeah. I mean, if the NBA is shutting down indefinitely, and then all the sports leagues follow, because then the next night hockey shut down, probably a day or two later, baseball shut down. It was surreal. I mean, that's the only thing I could think of, word I could think of. So there's been a lot of great moments. I love the baseball playoffs. I love how they did the basketball playoffs. There were a lot of other great moments in between, but that one just totally 100% stands out for me.
Yeah. Speaking of baseball playoffs, I think one of the things that stuck out to me was the expanded playoffs, which I thought was very interesting. To me, one of the bigger things is, well, I'll go with two. First is LA ruling the sports world this year. Mookie Betts coming over and completely transforming the Dodgers. Dodgers year after year, making the playoffs, winning the division, finally taking that next step to win the World Series was really big. LeBron winning his 4th title with 3 different teams.
Unbelievable. And against Miami.
Against Miami. Which that was crazy. The whole NBA bubble thing is something I think we'll look back on like, wow, that was really like fun and unique. I think another thing that sticks out is Milwaukee not showing up to their game. I remember like kind of watching that unfold where I saw the alert, like Milwaukee hasn't reported yet. This was right after the shooting that happened in their own backyard. And then not just them, but then all the other NBA teams just saying, we're not playing at all. And then hockey canceling for a couple days. Baseball didn't cancel all of their games, but a few of them were. I think that was just one of those moments where you're like, wow. I think one way that we can categorize 2020 is like, sports is important, but there's stuff that's more important than sports.
Yeah. It transcended when the Bucks didn't play that night. Then sports transcended what was going on in society. And there are a lot of times, sports can be our escape, where we want. So, that night I had such mixed feelings, I'm like, wait, because I think the next night the Mets actually took the field and they shook hands and then they left the field. And several other teams did the same. And so it was surreal. It's just been a surreal year.
Yeah.
And those moments really, really stood out, and then even Kenny Smith walking off of the set of Inside the NBA, and it was surreal.
Yeah,
it was surreal. But I do think, and I think you feel the same way, I think every once in a while it's okay for an athlete to take a stand. Doesn't mean that we have to listen, or doesn't mean that we're following them. I think the whole Colin Kaepernick thing, I think probably got a little bit twisted maybe, but the fact that he has the right to do that is one of the great things I think about living, in this country. And so the Bucks having a right to, we're not going to play because we just don't like what's going on, not only, there in Wisconsin, but throughout our nation. I think that's okay. I don't have to totally agree with it. I mean, I might have done it a little bit different. I don't know. I don't know what I would have done.
Yeah.
But the fact that they have the right to do that, I think is important. So, I mean, it's going to wind up pretty good, I think. And I think we're going to go into 2021 with some good momentum with the vaccine and everything like that. And I think sports may, here's the last thing that we'll say, right?
Yeah.
You and I talked about this morning. No other time in history do people realize how important the fans are.
Yeah.
I mean, just think about these teams. You don't hear it much, but I know a lot of teams are really hurting financially.
Yeah.
But also the people that haven't been working, the vendors and people that work at the concession stand, parking attendants, this has definitely hit them hard as well. I know some teams have stepped up and paid them, and some players have chipped in money to pay them, but that's been really hard. But they need the fans. They absolutely need the fans. Like I said last week, it would have been nice for the Giants to have the Giant faithful there, rooting them on against the Browns. And that would have been like, in Seattle, they have the big sign, the 12th man, right? And the fans, they take that seriously.
Yeah, they sell. I remember the jerseys were like a top 10.
Yeah, they take that seriously. All right, well, let's wrap up. It's been quite a year. We're going to continue to do this. We're going to start to add a few guests with us, right? We're gonna get a third person involved every once in a while, but primarily it's going to be the two of us, and we'll continue to bring you, things about sports, but also some scripture. We'll try to do that purposefully a little bit more often in that. So, but for now, why don't you sign us off, man?
All right, this is Kenny Square Dad.
Kenny.
With Sports on the Positive Tip. Hope you guys have a happy new year, and we'll see you next year.
Awesome. Yeah, absolutely. Have a great new year, folks.